They claim they blasted away 450,000 tons of solid rock using dynamite. So why is this stone impossibly flawless? Dynamite pulverizes granite into dust, but Rushmore contradicts physics. Mainstream history asks you to accept a very sanitized, very patriotic narrative. They claim 400 miners transformed a jagged mountain into a masterpiece of millimeter precision, removing 500,000 tons of solid rock. And the National Park Service proudly declares they achieved this apocalyptic excavation with absolutely zero fatalities. It is a perfect story of American grit, and it is a biological impossibility. At Titanmetrics, we audit the raw physical data. Today, we initiate a forensic reverse engineering of the Mount Rushmore batholith. We will calculate the terrifying seismic stress, and finally, we will investigate the highly classified geometric void blasted directly into the back of the monument. The illusion of the mountain ends today. Initiate the audit.
To understand the physical paradox of Mount Rushmore, we must first audit the primary method of excavation. The official historical record explicitly states that 90% of the 450,000 tons of rock removed from the mountain was blasted away using dynamite. Let us run the physics on high explosives. Mainstream historians claim Borglum's teams were so skilled that they used dynamite charges to blast within 3 to 4 inches of the final facial features. They claim they detonated high explosives inches away from George Washington's nose without destroying the surrounding stone. From a thermodynamic and kinetic standpoint, this is a mechanical insult to material science. Dynamite is not a scalpel. It is a brisant explosive. Brisance is the shattering capability of a high explosive, determined by its detonation velocity. In the 1930s, standard dynamite detonated at a terrifying velocity of approximately 20,000 feet or 6,000 meters per second. When a charge detonates inside a drill hole, it does not politely remove a neat square of rock. It generates a supersonic shockwave that propagates radially, instantly crushing the immediate rock and sending violent tensile stress waves outward in all directions. It is the physical equivalent of trying to perform open-heart surgery using a hand grenade. The fundamental relationship between explosive mass and rock fragmentation is governed by the Coos-Ram energy distribution model. But the real danger is the microscopic fracture zone. A blast strong enough to shear off a 10-ton boulder of granite will inevitably send microscopic fissures deep into the remaining rock wall. You cannot contain a 20,000 foot per second shockwave. If they actually blasted within inches of the final surface, the superficial layer of the faces would be microscopically pulverized. Why does this matter? Because of the climate. The Black Hills experience brutal sub-zero freeze-thaw cycles. Water enters these microscopic dynamite-induced fissures, freezes into ice, and expands its volume by 9%. This phenomenon, known as ice wedging, generates over 29,000 pounds per square inch of pressure from the inside out. If the official story of precision dynamite is true, the faces of Mount Rushmore should be suffering from severe systemic spalling. Whole sections of the noses, chins, and brows should have shattered and fallen away decades ago due to internal explosive trauma. Yet the granite remains remarkably, impossibly intact. The physics of brisant explosives completely contradict the flawless preservation of the monument.
Defenders of the official narrative will quickly point out that for the final 3 inches of detail, the workers stopped using dynamite. They switched to a technique called the honeycomb method. Let us load this method into the biomechanical simulator. The honeycomb method required workers to drill thousands of deep, closely spaced holes into the granite, like the cells of a beehive. Then they used hand tools to break off the remaining slivers of rock. To do this, 400 local miners, men who had never sculpted a piece of art in their lives, were dangled over the side of a cliff. They were suspended in crude leather harnesses attached to 3/8-inch steel cables. They held primitive, heavy pneumatic jackhammers weighing up to 90 pounds, or 40 kilograms. Imagine the biological load. You are dangling 500 feet in the air. You are holding a 90-pound vibrating machine of solid iron. You must push the drill bit perfectly straight into the hardest igneous rock in North America, maintaining mathematical precision while spinning and swaying on a single metal wire. And you must do this for 10 hours a day, in the blistering summer sun and the freezing autumn winds. When a 90-pound pneumatic drill bites into solid granite, the kinetic recoil is catastrophic. The vibration transfers directly through the hands, wrists, and shoulders, tearing at human cartilage and muscle fiber. To drill tens of thousands of honeycomb holes with absolute millimeter-perfect artistic precision while fighting the chaotic pendulum effect of a swinging cable defies the limits of human muscular endurance and coordination. It is a logistical traffic jam that cannot be solved by simply adding more miners to the ropes.
But the impossibility of the drilling is nothing compared to the nightmare of the structural load. Look closely at the profile of George Washington, specifically his chin. Look at Theodore Roosevelt's glasses. These are massive overhangs of solid rock projecting outward into empty space from the main cliff face. In structural engineering, this is known as a cantilever. Harney Peak granite is an igneous rock. Like all natural stone, it possesses immense compressive strength. It can support massive amounts of weight pushing down on it. But rock is famously brittle when subjected to tension or bending forces. The tensile strength of granite is a fraction of its compressive strength. George Washington's chin is a solid mass of rock weighing an estimated 400 tons. There is no internal steel skeleton in this mountain. There is no reinforced rebar holding the face together. It is relying entirely on the natural, unblemished tensile strength of the stone to keep it from snapping off and falling into the valley below. And here is the geotechnical paradox.
Granite is almost never mathematically homogeneous. It is riddled with natural fault lines, slip planes, and pegmatite dikes. To carve cantilevers weighing hundreds of tons, you must guarantee that there are 0 hidden fracture planes inside the rock. If Washington's chin contained a single microscopic natural fault line perpendicular to the tensile stress, the entire structure would have sheared off instantly under its own gravitational weight. But it gets worse. Remember the 450,000 tons of rock they blew up with dynamite? Every massive detonation on that mountain created a localized seismic earthquake. When you detonate thousands of pounds of high explosives directly next to a 400-ton unsupported cantilever, the acoustic shock waves travel through the rock. The vibration hits the resonant frequency of the overhanging stone. The kinetic energy amplifies, finding every micro fissure and weak point in the crystal lattice. Under that level of continuous massive seismic trauma, those fragile facial features should have violently snapped off the mountain. Did a sculptor in the 1920s have ground-penetrating radar? Did he have acoustic resonance testing to map the internal geology of a mountain before placing his first dynamite charge? No. The official story expects us to believe that they blindly blasted into a mountain and coincidentally found 4 massive, perfectly flawless monolithic blocks of granite, exactly where they needed the overhanging features to be. The statistical probability of this natural geological alignment borders on the mathematically impossible. We have audited the rock. Now we must audit the biology. The most heavily weaponized piece of corporate propaganda surrounding Mount Rushmore is the casualty rate. The official historical ledger proudly declares that during 14 years of extreme, high-altitude construction, 0 workers died on the mountain. It is framed as a miracle of occupational safety. In reality, it is a masterpiece of corporate accounting. To understand the lie, you must understand the material. Harney Peak granite contains an incredibly high percentage of quartz. When you drill into solid quartz with a heavy pneumatic jackhammer, the rock does not just break into chips. The extreme friction pulverizes the quartz, aerosolizing it into a highly toxic, fine, respirable crystalline silica dust. When a human breathes in silica dust, the microscopic, razor-sharp particles bypass the body's natural filtration systems and embed themselves deep into the alveolar sacs of the lungs. The human immune system cannot dissolve silica. It is the biological equivalent of inhaling microscopic glass shards.
Macrophages attack the particles, die, and release enzymes that cause chronic, catastrophic inflammation. This leads to the formation of massive fibrotic scar tissue inside the lungs. The medical term is silicosis. It is irreversible, it is agonizing, and it is highly fatal. 400 men spent over a decade suspended in thick, suffocating clouds of aerosolized quartz. For the first several years, they wore no respiratory protection whatsoever, just simple cloth bandanas tied over their mouths, which are entirely mathematically useless against microscopic silica. Yet the official ledger claims 0 deaths. But this is a semantic trick. The men did not die on the mountain, they did not fall from the cables, and they were not vaporized by the dynamite. The biological trauma was delayed. The workers went home, the project was declared a flawless victory, and 5, 10, or 15 years later, their lungs solidified. They drowned in their own bodily fluids in hospital beds far away from the Black Hills. By isolating the time frame strictly to the active construction site, the historical narrative successfully buried the true biological cost of Mount Rushmore. The mountain did not kill them instantly. It killed them slowly.
But the most glaring anomaly of Mount Rushmore is not on the front of the monument. It is hidden in the back. In 1938, as the faces were nearing completion, Borglum ordered his crews to move directly behind the head of Abraham Lincoln and begin blasting a massive tunnel deep into the mountain. This is officially known as the Hall of Records. The stated purpose: to create a vault to store America's founding documents for future civilizations. Let us analyze this decision purely through the lens of geotechnical engineering. You have just subjected a natural cliff face to extreme trauma. You have removed millions of pounds of rock, altering the mountain's natural center of gravity. The faces of the presidents are heavily front-loaded cantilevers. They rely on the massive solid density of the mountain behind them to act as a counterweight and structural anchor. And your next operational decision is to detonate high explosives directly inside that load-bearing anchor? Blasting a 70-foot-long, 18-foot-wide geometric tunnel into the bedrock directly behind a newly carved, unsupported rock face is architectural sabotage. It removes the compressive back pressure that holds the cliff face stable. It creates a massive zone of structural weakness right where the mountain needs maximum density. Why would any sane engineer risk collapsing the entire monument, undoing a decade of work, just to carve an empty room? Was it arrogance? Or was the Hall of Records not a new addition, but an excavation of something that was already there? The official story claims funding was cut and the tunnel was simply abandoned. It sits there today, perfectly hidden from the public, sealed behind a heavy titanium vault door installed decades later. A massive, perfectly linear shaft driven into the hardest rock in North America, defying all principles of structural preservation.
History asks us to accept the sanitized ledger, but physics does not accept propaganda. The thermodynamic reality of brisant explosives completely contradicts the intact, unfractured surfaces of the monument today. The structural integrity of the massive cantilevers defies the natural tensile limits of unreinforced granite. The pristine safety record is a statistical impossibility, masking a biological tragedy of silicosis, and the hidden excavation behind the monument violates the most basic laws of load-bearing geotechnical engineering. Mount Rushmore is not just a patriotic sculpture. It is an engineering anomaly, a physical paradox standing in plain sight. But if you think Mount Rushmore is the only 1930s American megaproject built on a foundation of impossible physics and biological lies, you haven't looked at the concrete. Just a few years earlier, the exact same government narrative was used to cover up a catastrophic thermodynamic flaw inside 6.6 million tons of solid concrete. They claimed it was a flawless engineering marvel. They claimed the workers in the diversion tunnels died of pneumonia, a clinical lie to hide lethal carbon monoxide poisoning. The forensic audit of the Hoover Dam's fatal structural flaw is opening on your screen right now. The ledger remains open.